The War of Chips. Why tiny technology is so important to all of us. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's discussion about something that might sound small, but is actually huge in our world. We're talking about computer chips. Now, you might be thinking about the chips you eat with your sandwich, but today we're exploring a different kind of chip. These are the tiny pieces of technology that power almost everything around us. Let's start with a simple question. What do your smartphone, your car, your washing machine, and even your coffee maker have in common? They all have computer chips inside them. These chips are so small you could fit dozens of them on your fingernail. Yet they control our modern world in ways most people never think about. What exactly are computer chips? Imagine your brain, but much smaller and made of silicon instead of flesh. That's basically what a computer chip is. It's a tiny piece of material that can think, remember, and make decisions. We also call them semiconductors or microchips. Think of a chip like a tiny city. In a real city, you have roads, buildings, and millions of people all working together. In a computer chip, you have tiny pathways and billions of microscopic switches all working together. These switches turn on and off millions of times per second. This is how chips process information and make things work. Here's something amazing to consider. The most advanced chips today have over 100 billion tiny switches packed into a space smaller than your thumbnail. To put this in perspective, that's more switches than there are stars in our galaxy, all working together in perfect harmony. Why are they called the foundation of modern life? Let's talk about why these tiny devices are so incredibly important. First, think about your morning routine. You wake up to an alarm on your phone. That's a chip working. You start your car to go to work. More chips are controlling your engine, your GPS, and your safety systems. You use your credit card to buy coffee. The payment system runs on chips too. Now imagine if all these chips suddenly stopped working. Your phone would be silent. Your car wouldn't start. The traffic lights wouldn't change. The grocery store couldn't process payments. Hospitals couldn't use their medical equipment. This scenario might sound like science fiction, but it shows us how dependent we are on these tiny pieces of technology. This is exactly what happened during the chip shortage that began in 2020. Car companies had to stop making cars because they couldn't get enough chips. People couldn't buy new laptops or phones. Prices went up for almost everything electronic. This shortage taught the world a valuable lesson about how important chips really are. The players in the chip game. So who makes these important chips? This is where our story gets interesting. Making computer chips is one of the most complex manufacturing processes humans have ever created. It's harder than building rockets or performing brain surgery. Let's start with Taiwan. This small island nation makes about 60% of all the world's chips. The most important company there is called TSMC, which stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Think of TSMC as the world's most advanced chip factory. Companies like Apple, Google, and Nvidia all send their chip designs to TSMC to be manufactured. Why is Taiwan so important in this industry? Well, it started decades ago when the government decided to invest heavily in technology education and manufacturing. They built the most advanced factories and trained the most skilled workers. Over time, Taiwan became so good at making chips that the rest of the world became dependent on them. But Taiwan isn't the only player. South Korea has companies like Samsung that make both chips and the products that use them. Japan has companies that make the special materials needed for chip production. The Netherlands has a company called ASML that makes the only machines in the world capable of creating the most advanced chips. And what about the United States? America invented the computer chip back in the 1950s. American companies like Intel were once the world leaders. However, over the years, much of the actual manufacturing moved to Asia because it was cheaper. Now America is realizing this might have been a mistake. Why countries are fighting over chips? Here's where our story becomes a battle. Countries around the world are starting to understand that controlling chip production means controlling the future. It's like controlling oil was important in the 20th century. Chips are the oil of the 21st century. Let's talk about China first. China uses more computer chips than any other country because it makes so many electronic products. However, China cannot make the most advanced chips itself. This creates a big problem. China needs these chips for everything from smartphones to military equipment, but it has to buy them from other countries. The United States government has noticed this situation. America decided to use this as a way to limit China's technological growth. In recent years, the U.S. has created rules that make it very difficult for American companies to sell advanced chips or chip-making equipment to China. It's like refusing to sell someone the ingredients they need to bake bread. China's response has been to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in building its own chip industry. The Chinese government has made chip manufacturing a top priority. They're trying to become self-sufficient, which means they want to make their own chips instead of buying them from other countries. Meanwhile, other countries are watching this situation very carefully. Japan, South Korea, and European nations are all trying to figure out where they fit in this new world order. They don't want to be left behind if the chip supply chains get disrupted. The real-world impact on regular people. Now you might be wondering, how does this chip war affect me personally? Let me give you some concrete examples that show why this matters to your daily life. First, let's talk about prices. When there aren't enough chips available, the cost of everything electronic goes up. During the recent chip shortage, car prices increased by thousands of dollars. Laptop computers became much more expensive. Even simple appliances like washing machines cost more because they contain chips. Second, consider innovation. The most advanced chips enable new technologies like artificial intelligence, autonomous cars, and virtual reality. If your country can't access these chips, it falls behind in developing new technologies. This means fewer good jobs and a lower standard of living over time. Third, think about national security. Modern military equipment relies heavily on advanced computer chips. Countries that can't access these chips have weaker defense capabilities. This is why the chip war is not just about economics but also about national safety. Here's a story that illustrates this point. A few years ago, a major hospital system had to delay important surgeries because they couldn't get replacement chips for their medical equipment. The chips they needed were manufactured in Asia, and shipping delays meant patients had to wait longer for life-saving procedures. The manufacturing marvel. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how incredible chip manufacturing really is. Creating a modern computer chip is like performing millions of precise operations on something smaller than a human hair. The process starts with pure silicon, which comes from sand. Yes, the chips that power our smartphones start as ordinary beach sand. This silicon is grown into perfect crystals and then sliced into thin wafers. Each wafer will eventually become hundreds of individual chips. Next comes the most amazing part. Using light beams and chemical processes, engineers carve billions of tiny circuits onto each chip. The precision required is mind-boggling. If you tried to scale this up to human size, it would be like drawing a map of your entire city with a pencil tip, but every line would have to be perfectly straight and exactly the right width. The factories that make these chips, called fabrication plants or fabs, cost between $10 and $20 billion to build. They're among the most expensive manufacturing facilities ever created. Inside these buildings, the air is thousands of times cleaner than a hospital operating room. Workers wear special suits that cover their entire bodies to prevent even a single speck of dust from contaminating the chips. The innovation race. The chip industry moves faster than almost any other technology sector. Every 2 years, companies try to make chips that are twice as powerful as the previous generation. This pattern has continued for over 50 years and is known as Moore's Law. But here's the challenge. We're reaching the physical limits of how small we can make these circuits. The newest chips have features that are only a few atoms wide. At this scale, the normal rules of physics start to behave differently. Engineers are having to invent entirely new ways to make chips work. This is why the competition is so intense. The company that figures out how to make the next generation of chips will have a huge advantage. They'll be able to create faster smartphones, more efficient electric cars, and more powerful artificial intelligence systems. Companies are spending enormous amounts of money on research and development. Intel, for example, spends about $15 billion every year just on developing new chip technologies. That's more than the entire budget of many small countries. The supply chain challenge. One thing that makes the chip war so complicated is how interconnected the global supply chain has become. No single country can make computer chips entirely on its own anymore. Let me explain this with an example. Imagine you want to bake a cake, but the flour comes from one country, the eggs from another, the sugar from a third, and the oven is made in a fourth country. That's what chip manufacturing is like today. The United States might design the chip, but the special chemicals needed come from Japan. The manufacturing equipment comes from the Netherlands. The actual production happens in Taiwan. The final assembly might occur in China. Then the finished products are shipped all over the world. This system worked well when countries cooperated with each other. But now that there's more tension between nations, this complex supply chain has become a weakness. If any link in the chain breaks, the whole system can fall apart. What governments are doing. Governments around the world are waking up to the importance of chips and taking action. The United States has passed laws providing over $50 billion to encourage chip manufacturing on American soil. The goal is to bring some of this critical production back home. The European Union has announced similar plans. They want to produce 20% of the world's chips by 2030. Currently, Europe makes only about 8% of global chips, so this would be a huge increase. Even smaller countries are getting involved. India is offering incentives to chip companies to build factories there. Singapore is expanding its chip manufacturing capabilities. Countries that never thought about semiconductors before are now developing national chip strategies. But building a chip industry from scratch is incredibly difficult. It's not just about money. You need highly trained engineers, specialized suppliers, and decades of experience. This is why it's taken countries like China so long to develop their own advanced chip capabilities, despite investing hundreds of billions of dollars. The future of the chip war. So what happens next in this technological battle? Most experts believe the chip war will continue for many years to come. Countries will keep trying to reduce their dependence on others while building up their own capabilities. We're likely to see the world split into different technology zones. There might be a Chinese technology ecosystem, an American ecosystem, and perhaps a European one. Each zone would have its own standards and supply chains. This could mean that in the future, your choice of smartphone or laptop might depend on which country you live in. Products designed for the American market might not work well in China, and vice versa. However, this fragmentation could also slow down innovation and make technology more expensive. When companies can sell to the entire world, they can invest more in research and development. If markets become divided, there's less money available for creating new technologies. Why this matters for your future? As we wrap up our discussion, let's think about why understanding the chip war is important for your personal future. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just someone trying to make sense of the modern world, this topic affects you in several ways. First, career opportunities. The chip industry creates millions of high-paying jobs, not just for engineers but for technicians, managers, salespeople, and many other roles. Understanding this industry could help you identify promising career paths. Second, investment decisions. As chips become more important, companies in this sector might become more valuable. Even if you're not investing in stocks now, understanding these trends could help you make better financial decisions in the future. Third, as a citizen and voter, you'll be asked to support policies related to technology and international trade. Having a basic understanding of why chips are important will help you make informed decisions about these issues. The human side of technology. Before we finish, let's remember that behind all this talk of geopolitics and economics are real people whose lives are affected by the chip war. Engineers working 12-hour days to develop new technologies. Factory workers whose jobs depend on global supply chains. Students choosing what to study based on where they think technology is heading. There's also the broader question of how technology should serve humanity. As chips become more powerful, they enable both wonderful innovations and concerning developments. Artificial intelligence can help doctors diagnose diseases faster, but it can also be used for surveillance. Autonomous vehicles might save lives, but they could also eliminate millions of driving jobs. The chip war isn't just about which country will dominate technology. It's about what kind of future we want to create and who gets to decide how these powerful tools are used. Conclusion. The war of chips might seem like something happening far away in corporate boardrooms and government offices. But as we've seen today, it affects all of us in very practical ways. From the phone in your pocket to the car you drive. From the price you pay for electronics to the job opportunities available in your community, chips shape our world. Understanding this topic helps us become more informed citizens, and better prepared for a future where technology plays an even bigger role in our lives. The next time you hear about trade tensions between countries or new technology policies, you'll have the knowledge to understand what's really at stake. The chip war is far from over. In fact, it's probably just beginning. As these tiny pieces of technology become even more central to everything we do, the competition to control them will only intensify. But by staying informed and engaged, we can all play a part in shaping how this story unfolds. What do you think about the role of chips in our world? How might this technological competition affect your own life and community? These are questions worth considering as we navigate our increasingly connected and chip-dependent future. Thank you for joining me in exploring this fascinating and important topic. The world of computer chips might be complex, but understanding it helps us better understand the world we live in and where it might be heading next.